This is a prison for orcas, or a whale jail, located near the Russian city of Nakotka on the coast of the Sea of Japan. An orca named Zena was kept here for a year, but when she was released, it turned out that too much time had passed. The orca may have lost survival skills in the wild, and that wasn't even the scariest part, because she was in for a meeting with other orcas. Overall, I hesitated a bit about making a video on this topic, because there isn't anything particularly interesting about releasing animals back into the wild. But then I started coming across more and more articles about this orca, and in the end, the video turned out to be very exciting. First coffee, and I'll tell you everything in detail. Don't forget to hit the like button. I'm unobtrusively reminding you. In the summer of 2018, 4 Russian companies that supply marine mammals to aquariums caught nearly 100 belugas and orcas over several months. The entire catch was declared illegal, but they couldn't simply let the animals go. Instead, belugas and orcas were placed in cramped pens in Srednaya Bay. And perhaps no one would have noticed that if not for the drone. It captured video footage showing numerous animals squeezed into small sea pens. This caught the attention of the international community, and the media dubbed the site a whale jail. In short, everyone was angry. And rightly so. When the experts arrived on the scene, it turned out the animals were in very bad shape. Most of them had skin damage. This may indicate health problems. It's worth noting that one orca costs about $100 million, but the animals were treated as if they were worth nothing. Experts estimated that during their months in captivity, orcas and belugas appeared to have suffered. Anyone would suffer if they had to spend over a year in a cramped cell, but they even trained wild animals to eat dead fish. The plan was to make huge profits by selling sea creatures to marine parks in China, and they probably would have quietly sold orcas and belugas straight from the jail if it weren't for the media attention. One of the orcas that ended up in that jail was 8-year-old Zena. Zena started showing signs of frostbite and infection while still in prison from the stagnant, icy winter waters. To put it simply, the water was too cold, and the orca couldn't move much to warm up. Nevertheless, after Zena and the others received basic training, were examined, treated, and well-fed, specialists decided they could be released back. And then the Russian government began the process of returning the animals to the wild. It was the largest rescue program for cetaceans in history. By the way, if you think there are more belugas than orcas in the video of the release, it's because there were only 11 orcas in captivity, while there were 90 belugas. Naturally, the latter appeared more frequently in the shots, but that's just a side comment. So they decided to release the animals into the wild, but the implementation of this plan dragged on for a long time. There were many debates about whether the captive orcas could survive in the wild. Most of the captured animals were young, just a few months old, which meant they were separated from their families at a very young age. Alone in the wild, these orcas might simply not make it. And here's where the most interesting part begins. The thing is, there was no way to refer to the experience of other animal rights activists and guess the outcome because no one had ever done anything like this in the world. Previous attempts to reintegrate cetaceans kept in captivity into the wild had, let's say, mixed success. Both orcas and belugas live in groups, and an animal separated from its pod risks not finding a new one. Plus, there's the problem of feeding. When people have been feeding you for a whole year, even with unfamiliar food, and you're basically still a teenager, you might starve in the wild, simply because you have no idea how to hunt on your own. And how can you swim long distances if you're used to a small enclosure? How do you even go about this new life? Yet people decided to take the risk. Of course, the animals couldn't just be released in the same place where they were held in jail. That would cause a huge ecological imbalance from so many predators. And people were too close. There was a need for transportation for everyone, including Zena. Can you imagine how stressful this situation is for an animal already under constant stress and having health problems? The relocation process turned out to be very long. 2 or 3 orcas were sent on their way at the same time. This was necessary to release them in small groups. Each animal was lifted from the enclosure on a sling, placed on a tractor trailer equipped with a giant tub filled with water, and taken hundreds of miles north to the Amur River. The release site was chosen to be the Sea of Okhotsk, about 1,100 miles from where the orcas and belugas were caught. To get to the sea, the animals in the tubs were loaded onto a barge and sent on a 6-day journey down the river before finally reaching their destination. Sometimes the trip on the trailer was so stressful and the vehicle shook so much that the workers had to climb into the tubs to pet the orcas and try to calm them down. And that was only half of the problem. The rescuers of the orcas had to deal with floods and bad weather, which delayed the transportation of dozens of animals and even threatened to completely disrupt their release. In the end, it took a whole 4 months to transport all the animals from the jail, add this time to the year that the orcas and belugas spent in captivity. But people tried to do everything right. There were 70 specialists watching over the transportation of the cetaceans, including vets and scientists, plus 2 personal handlers for each individual. Before release, the animals were fitted with GPS tags to track their future whereabouts because, well, I already mentioned it, the whole idea was very risky. Do you know the story of the orca named Keiko? Oh, you've definitely seen him. This guy starred in the movie Free Willy. Anyone who grew up in the 90s remembers that scene from the film well. The 3.6-ton orca jumps to freedom over the harbor wall and swims into the sunset with his family. However, in reality, Keiko's fate turned out differently. After the film became a box office hit, viewers soon found out that the real orca wasn't free. Keiko was performing at an amusement park in Mexico under poor conditions. It took a lot of effort, time, and money to get Keiko back into the wild, but it turned out he wasn't ready for it. Keiko was captured when he was about 2 years old, and he spent more than 10 years in captivity. Even though Keiko's mother theoretically could still be alive, finding her was practically impossible, just like the rest of his family. But that's not the worst thing. Keiko lost his survival instinct and didn't know that live fish were food. After being offered to catch one, he would return it to his trainers as if playing fetch. Moreover, after a long life in captivity, there was no way they could just release him and leave, like with Zena. To keep up with wild orcas swimming 100 miles a day, he needed to build up his endurance and lung capacity. Gradually, Keiko learned to follow the boat during long walks in the open ocean, but his love for people overcame any instincts, especially towards children. After encountering a father and daughter fishing at sea, Keiko followed them to the shore. It all ended sadly and quite quickly. In 2002, they released the orca into free swimming, and by December 2003, it was announced that Keiko had died. He never managed to integrate into the orca pod and passed away from pneumonia. Like Keiko, most whales and dolphins in captivity today wouldn't survive in the wild. Many of them were born in captivity. If these animals are released, they should only go into specially designated sanctuaries, where people will take care of them. You see why I said that the case of Zena and her fellows who were kept in the whale jail was unique? It's not just about their number, but also that only a year passed since they were captured. Compared to Keiko, they have much better odds. Anyway, just being free isn't enough. You also gotta survive out there. It all starts with the place of release. It shouldn't be random. If you pick the wrong one, the animal might not make it through winter. Like what happened to a few belugas released in November 2019 in the Sea of Japan near Lazovsky Nature Reserve. That's not their usual habitat. So yeah, the belugas definitely don't like it there. And for wild animals, not liking it can actually mean death. The same goes for orcas. It's really important to understand which ecotype a particular individual belongs to because, well, those who've watched our videos about orcas already know that these animals are not one monolithic species. Orcas are different, with different behaviors and different home ranges. And if an orca ends up in a place where there's no usual food for many miles around, it will probably try to find it, but eventually will die of starvation. Take Zena, for instance. She's one of those transient orcas. They're planned to be separated into a separate species if the scientific community comes to an agreement. I was just talking about them recently. So in short, transient orcas feed on mammals, migrate a lot, and hunt quietly. So if Zena were released, for example, to resident orcas who only eat fish, she wouldn't adapt at best. At worst, she'd suffer from hunger without proper prey. But what usually happens when an orca is released? Well, it all comes down to the word usually, because we have no statistics or even observations. No one except Zena and her kin released from the jail has been in such conditions or been released from them in such a manner. So we can only go by this story. So what do we have? According to Satellite Tags data, orcas from the third release, Zoya, Tikhon, and Gaika, along with the younger female Alexandra from the second release, traveled together for about 10 days. Then the group split up. With Zena, things are more complicated because she can't be identified by her tag anymore. The orca simply got rid of her beacon, and quite quickly, just a month after release. However, thanks to satellite monitoring of other orcas, some conclusions can be made. For instance, during the summer and early autumn, orcas stayed in the Shantar district of the northwest part of the Sea of Okhotsk, traveling to their traditional summer hunting spots, Academy Bay, Tugur Bay, and Uda Bay. It also became clear that if you release a male and a young female into the wild, they don't head straight into the open sea, but wait near the shore until a more mature female is released to join them. Only then do they all swim away together. Essentially, it's already a small pod, and pods are crucial for orcas. The problem is that any such orca community in the wild is like a family, where animals are born and spend their entire lives. It's extremely rare for an orca from one pod to be accepted or join another pod. Only males mix up the gene pool, but otherwise orca families are very isolated. So much so that each one has its own dialect. Orcas communicate with various squeaks, burbles, and whistles, so there's a good chance that other orcas just wouldn't accept Zena, even if they were the same species. It's pretty tough to let someone into the family who's speaking a different language. As a result, Zena would have to survive on her own. And that would be an ordeal. Orcas are too social, and they hunt in groups, so the odds of a lone orca are very slim. There's even research suggesting that orcas simply can't survive outside a pod. A pod ensures their survival, so our hero Zena had just two choices: find a new family or die. What actually happened? Zena was released on July 16, 2019. A month later, on August 16th, the orca got rid of its tag. Then Zena was seen on September 4th, but it turned out to be too difficult to track her without the tags. Zena disappeared, but only to reappear again. The orca freed from the infamous Russian whale jail was noticed by the filming crew of Frozen Planet 2. They recognized Zena by the tag on her large dorsal fin, and it turned out she's doing great. She's found a pod to swim and hunt with, and other orcas are even sharing food with her, a gesture that speaks of really good relationships and close bonds. In short, I'd say our hero is thriving. She's probably lucky she didn't lose her hunting and social skills over the past year. It's unclear whether Zena reunited with her old family or was taken in by another one, and we can't really find out for sure. We just don't have information on where and how Zena was caught, and the people who did it probably won't share that info. But apparently Zena did return to her actual relatives. She was accepted very quickly, and close family ties explain this the best. A year wasn't long enough to forget them, or the dialect. And you know, this reunion seems very touching to me. Not because orcas shouldn't be in captivity, but because family is cool. Well, you're here, so you owe me a like. See you later.